Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm hoping that my two colleagues will be coming in virtually. Amos Yadlin, who I think needs no introduction, and there's Amos now, and there's my dear friend, my former commander on a couple of occasions, Dave Petraeus. Amos, we know where you are this morning, so if you need to take a break in the event that there's some incoming, you let us know, and we'll pause for a moment. This is the 2026 Montgomery Summit, so it's time once again for the Generals Show. And last year we gathered and talked extensively about what was going on in Gaza and the war that Israel had been waging against Hamas and Hezbollah in the aftermath of the horrific attack on Israel on the 7th of October, 2023. It's a pretty sobering conversation. I don't think that either of any of the three of us could have imagined that a year later we'd be gathering in this really important summit on this really important day to have a conversation about a war that has generally spread across the entire region and will have global economic implications, if not global kinetic implications as well. Now, all three of us have gone to war on behalf of our countries. And in general, all three of us, in going to war, supported clear and coherent national objectives, political objectives. And we should never wage war, commit military forces, commit the lives of our children and the treasures of our country without clear political objectives. But this has been an issue in this particular conflict, this war, and it is a war. I don't care what other people choose to style it. So let me just ask both of these very experienced military leaders who've led forces at the very peak of their careers and the very peak of authority, what their feeling is in terms of whether we have clear political objectives as we have gone to war in the region. And I'll start with you, Dave. What are your thoughts on this, if I may?
Well, I think it's accurate to say there's been a bit of improvisation during the time that this has been ongoing, that there was clarification. The president, in his initial announcement of the start of this war, talked about regime change, but then I think quite quickly clarified that and said that's something that will have to come from the Iranians themselves. We can set conditions for that, we can help with that. But it's not something we could do, given the challenges that would entail. And I think that the military objectives have been pretty clear. They have emerged over time. It's to go after the regime leaders. And I should talk about why we actually launched this war when we did, at least in my view. And I'd love to hear Amos's take on that as well. But first, the Israelis were going to attack anyway. They have been so concerned about the reconstitution of the missile program, which did cause challenges during the 12-day war for all of the extraordinary missile defenses. Still 5 to 7% of the missiles got through. I was in Tel Aviv 5 weeks or so ago, saw the damage that was done. And in talking to those in the Curia, their Pentagon, they made it very clear that they would not allow this to happen. And here I think it's important to recognize that Israel's national security orientation has fundamentally changed since the horrific attacks of 10/7, where it will not allow a kind of threat to emerge. They will take it down before that happens. You've seen that against Hezbollah. Obviously, you've seen it in the degradation of Hamas, by no means destroyed yet, as we discussed last year, and then also with Iran. And they were going to go after the missile program, which was reconstituting in a more rapid and threatening way than where they were comfortable with watching. Then you have in Washington enormous frustration. Say what you will about the mediators saying that there was great progress and that, it was just around the corner, would have a nuclear agreement. That was not the perception at all of those in the White House. President was very frustrated with that. And then you have this exquisite intelligence. It doesn't get any better than pattern of life, John, as you and almost know very, very well. And here it was, given that one of the objectives very clearly from the beginning, publicly stated, was to decapitate the senior leadership. And here you have a chance that the Supreme Leader, Minister of Defense, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Equivalent, Revolutionary Guards Corps, et cetera. So, and that was an objective, and that obviously has been achieved, and it has continued to be achieved. But then going after, of course, the air and missile defense right away to ensure that we can fly non-stealthy aircraft, not just the stealth bomber and fighter and cruise missiles. Then the missile launchers themselves, again, a big objective of this effort, and the missile stocks. Over time, more focus on the drones and the launch sites. The drones have proven to be particularly challenging in certain respects, certain countries. They've been the source of the death of our 7 soldiers and the serious wounding of a number of others. The naval forces, and then the regime forces in general, more of their leaders, headquarters, logistics bases, command and control facilities, and so forth. And then also any remnants of the nuclear infrastructure. Again, the 12-day war set that back probably a couple of years, but there's a knowledge of apparently a 60% enriched uranium stockpile under Esfahan, the damaged, destroyed Esfahan, and I think we'll do more to make that completely inaccessible to the extent that we can, and then watch it. So, and then other targets to try to create conditions for a regime change, which again was acknowledged not something we could do. It would be the Iranian people, the Iranian splintered forces or whatever. But here we have to temper our aspirations because, as you all know, over 1 million men in arms in the regime force. It's 150,000 in the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps alone. It's 200,000 in besieged militia before they call up the reserves. It's 400,000 in the Artesh, their regular military. The National Police, again, also killing innocent civilians in the tens and thousands, along with the besieged militia. 250,000, and even their intelligence service has 25,000 agents it can put on the street. And again, this is all before mobilizing further and calling reserves. So I think those objectives actually have emerged as fairly clear, but noting, as I mentioned earlier, there's and with President Trump, I think there's always a degree of extemporaneous, of improvisation, if you will. And in fact, his assessment and the assessment of many around him is that unpredictability is a good feature. You can make that case, you can argue against it in an actual crisis, but that has been how this has proceeded. And again, over time, I think it has become relatively clear, although certainly the initial message set up regime change, and that clearly is something that cannot be achieved through military means that are reasonably expected to be committed. Over.
Thanks, Dave. That was a long and I think very detailed explanation. And I'm not sure I fully agree with being extemporaneous when we've got that many troops in combat, because it has whipsawed our allies in many respects. And I'm not sure that we find ourselves, I do agree with the vast majority of what you said, but we have not necessarily found ourselves in consonant with our principal ally in this one, in this case, which is Israel. Amos, would you come in, please, and talk about your thoughts on whether the Prime Minister gave a clear explanation with regard to the national objectives of this conflict, and also give us a little bit. And Dave gave us an extraordinary explanation on the effects of the conflict to this point, but your view on the effectiveness of the Israeli airstrikes and the Israeli air campaign to this point, please.
Okay, we belong with 2 nations that are democracies. Democracies are going to war usually with a consensus, or at least majorities that support the war. I'm not sure this is the case in your country. I'm not sure the president have done a preparation with the public opinion about this war. In Israel, the Prime Minister does not need to do it. There is a consensus, opposition, coalition, almost every Israeli, that Iran is existential threat and Iran should be dealt sooner or later. For you, it may be a war of choice. For us, it's a war of necessity. And when we look at this war, this specific war that started on February 28, it was not initiated by Israel. David said rightly that the Iranian reconstruction of their ballistic missile force was faster than anybody predicted.
Right.
but the ballistic missiles were not described as an existential threat as a nuclear bomb. And it was not urgent for Israel. If it was up to Israel, it was not happening in the winter of 2026. By the way, in the Middle East, if you want to initiate a war and you have a very good air power, you do it in the summer and not in the winter. So I said that at least from the event developing, it is not an Israeli initiative. It's the brave people of Iran that went to the street on early January. It's the terrorist regime that massacred them with 30,000 people killed. By the way, we haven't saw the student on your campuses going against it. And it was the president that said and tweeted that help is on the way. And yes, the negotiation on the nuclear issue, which are quite difficult to understand what he wanted to help the people. So why suddenly he went to the nuclear issue that he already in the summer said that it was destroyed totally.
Obliterated was the word, obliterated.
Yeah, yeah. It's my English is not that good.
It's good enough, believe me.
And there is a lot of inconsistency in the argument. But I think that when the president decided to go, we of course joining. Of course we join. We prefer to go to war with the best military in the world. So here is something to pay attention. The US and Israel never went to war together, a full-scale war, shoulder to shoulder. When the leaders are on the same page, the president and the prime minister, the chief of staff of the Israeli IDF, and the chairman are speaking every day. CENTCOM, the Israeli Air Force is part of CENTCOM these days. And even in the level of the leader of an F-15 formation, when American find the target and they already drop their bombs, they transfer it in real time to an Israeli formation. So we are seeing something that unprecedented in Israel, and we are not part of NATO, we are not part of any formal alliance with the US, but we're doing it as if we are fighting in NATO or other alliance. This is very important. There is a division of labor. Israel took the northern part, mostly Tehran, and the western part where they are launching missiles to Israel. The US took the protection of your bases in the Gulf, the protection of your allies in the Gulf, and the southern part of Iran. And there are also division of labor on the priorities. Israel went to decapitate the leadership.
Right.
I'm not sure that in your legal system you are allowed to do it. And I'm not sure that operationally the level of precision and real-time intelligence is unique to destroy and to eliminate 40 leaders of the Iranian leadership and the military top generals in 40 seconds, never heard of. Then air superiority. You cannot win a war without air superiority. Ask the Russians and the Ukrainians. You need air superiority to be able to stop the launching towards Israel. So this was the leadership, air superiority, ballistic missiles, and yes, the nuclear is the most important, but it's not urgent. It was rolled back, as David said, 2 or 3 years, and you could do it at the end of the war.
And much of Midnight Hammer had taken out the nuclear program the previous summer. That's correct.
And some more attacks on the scientists, on Isfahan, on Natanz. And what we are seeing now in the families of targets that we are attacking is the industrial military base of Iran. Iran has a huge industry that producing these drones that they are giving to the Russians to attack Ukraine, and the ballistic missiles and the air defense. So Israel is trying, and I hope the US is joining on this industrial base to buy more time. Because if we go, and I will finish with this, to the two objectives that were well transmitted to the Israeli public. One is to degrade the capability of Iran to inflict damage and pain to the Middle East, to Israel, to American Marines in Beirut, to any forces that both of you saw the Iranians IED killing Americans all over the Middle East.
That's right.
So reduce it to a minimum. You never eliminate it totally. And on the regime change, we know very well you cannot change a regime from the air. You need boots on the ground. And neither America nor Israel going to send boots on the ground. It is not Germany 1945. It is not even Baghdad 2003. So you create the condition. You are weakening the regime to a level that you hope that the change will come from the inside. So clear objectives that serve political goal, that Iran will not influence the Middle East the way it's influenced it in the last 3-4 decades.
Dave, let me come back to you, and you can comment on Amos's remarks as well. But you did something as the commander of CENTCOM that a lot of people didn't think could happen, which was to integrate a region-wide ballistic missile defense capability, one country after another, and you integrated them in a way that gave them the ability to see the region as an organization, but also to share targeting information and ultimately to intercept any potential rockets, missiles, and now drones. We didn't think it could happen. You did it. What's your sense on how they have done? And very importantly, to divert just a bit from that question, what is your sense on the damage that has been inflicted on U.S. facilities in the region as well by those systems that managed to get through our missile and air defense capabilities, please?
I'll start with the latter, John. I don't think there's that much damage that has been done to our facilities. There have been facilities hit. You recall the size of some of these air bases and huge depots, and there have been some that have been hit and very, very little damage despite actually a missile warhead or a drone more likely. I think the countries have done very impressively, and it is a joint effort here. I loved Amos's line that the Israeli Air Force is part of Central Command. It is. There is one combined air operations center that's running this air fight. Yes, there's some geographic deconfliction in the rest of this, but this is very integrated, and only one element can do that, and that is the Combined Air Operations Center of Central Command, which has been running continuously, the only one in the world. Combat operations, when we were privileged to be the command team, you'll recall we not only had the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, also had freedom of navigation in the Gulf. That was the Iranians were planning to destroy their nuclear program. We had the Islamic State forerunners, AQAP, the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in Yemen was a very serious threat. And then even the problems that we had with the pirates from Somalia in the waters off there, for which we were responsible. So this is a command that knows how to do this, and it is doing it. Although I would submit, John, that it is probably not being run from the same facilities that we used to run it from, because we were in the region.
Right.
Our headquarters alone was half above ground. You don't want to be in that now. The Combined Air Operations Center was 2 floors above the ground, so that's not being done. I think against the missile threat, this has been going very, very well. And you're kind to remember that for the audience, the countries in the region refused to share their own air picture, what their radars and sensors were providing to them, to each other. There were all these rivalries and everything else. So we said, oh, not a problem. One after one, we convinced them to share it with us, and then we pumped back to them integrated air picture. Now, of course, you also have Israel in this, and necessarily, and so forth. I do think there is, over time, going to be a little bit of discomfort about what's called the missile math. And arguably, as I heard it in Tel Aviv, one of the reasons the 12-day air campaign ended on the 12th day is that there was a bit of concern in this regard, that you're constantly calculating how many launchers do they have, how many missiles do they have left, and how many interceptors do we have. And again, we know that number. Again, it's published. It's in our procurement documents. We know 620 Patriot missile interceptors last year. That was 3 times what it had been the year before. You can total these up. You normally shoot 2 to take down 1. I'm not sure we can afford to do that now, given the numbers.
Right.
And countries in the region have actually publicly said they're getting a bit uncomfortable about this. So that's just a reality. Despite doing exceedingly well and taking them down, there's a little bit of concern. The bigger issue, frankly, is the drones. Nowhere near the warhead. It's not a guided, it's not remotely piloted. It can't be, because they don't have the same communications means that have enabled us to do it over the years. But that has proven to be difficult. And again, you and I have talked before. I don't think any countries in the world have learned all that they should from the Ukrainian counter-drone operations as rapidly as we should. I went out on a mission with a drone intercept team just 4 or 5 weeks ago in the middle of the night, frigid weather. This pilot had knocked down 100 Russian drones, which are largely the Shaheds that Iran provided to them with some product improvements. So that, I think, is the area where over time we're going to have to expend a lot more in terms of resources and really concepts for it. And eventually you're going to have high-powered microwave every 2 kilometers up and down the Gulf or something along this line, because this is very tough on the business model there. And in fact, if the new regime, we wanted to get Dulce Rodriguez, to use the Venezuelan analogy, and I'm afraid we got sort of Kim Jong-un, a man who's the son of the former supreme leader, whose wife and mother were both killed in the initial strike and who was wounded, and now is fighting against America, against Israel, against his own population, and maybe for his own life. We're not sure how badly he was injured. But I think, again, on the missile defense front, very effective, noting that still even Israel, with all the assets, and we provided the THAAD battery to them last time, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, which shot $1.3 billion worth of munitions, interceptors in 12 days, even then, 5% or so of the missiles do get through. And now you have a quantity of drones even greater, different systems. You don't want to use a Patriot interceptor, $2 million, to intercept a $30,000 drone. But this is becoming more challenging in that regard. But, that's the missile math is one of the factors that I think President Trump very much will focus on determining when to end the war. Because you remember the question I asked on the way to Baghdad as a 2-star division commander, tell me how this ends, as the assumptions we'd been given were being invalidated one by one. And I forget I was on the record. I think this ends when President Trump says it ends, decides it ends. I'm sure the prime minister will go along with that, might want to go longer, but it will end. The question is, does the new supreme leader go along with that, or is he so suicidal? And of course, this is a regime that is noted for that capacity, that it continues, and it continues to carry out actions that keep us from getting the freedom of navigation for the fuel tankers through the Gulf and through the Strait of Hormuz. And that is a big, big factor right now as well, as are the price of Brent crude, as will be the achievement of military objectives. Is there an opposition force we could support? It does not appear that is coming about. The character of the new supreme leader, well, we fear that, again, he's going to be another hardline ideological cleric in a country that, despite a theocracy, is the most secular in the world and should be an energy superpower. It should be the UAE on steroids, second largest natural gas reserves, second largest oil reserves, an educated population, ancient civilization, and instead they've driven the economy into the ditch. They've brought poverty at home and isolation abroad. But will this be the individual who has the pragmatism to realize, can't we all get along together and enjoy what they should be enjoying instead of the ruin that they have brought to their country?
And Dave, one of the points you made, you just touched it very briefly, and I know that you and I both have dealt extensively with the Kurds. There was a brief moment last week where there was some discussion. I think the president initially said we want the Kurds to mobilize in the northern part of Iran. The Kurds have always been good friends to us. When you commanded 101st during the assault, they were good allies to you. I'm glad the president walked that back. Yes. Because the Kurds are too important to expend right now, and they may have a role in the future. Your thoughts on that? And Amos, I'll come to you on.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. By the way, I do agree that the president shouldn't have taken ground forces off the menu. I think that's important. Right. You and I had some leaders and policymakers under whom we served who told the enemy when we were going to draw down in the same speech that announced the buildup, who had red lines crossed and didn't take action. So I think you should never prematurely take something off the table. But I think it's very unlikely that we would see this. There's even been lately there's talk about, well, we should do a ground operation to destroy the final remnants of the stockpile of 60% enriched uranium. I said, are you going to take in earth excavation equipment on your back for this operation? Again, this would be a massive operation. So, but no, I agree. And there were thoughts clearly of perhaps sneakers on the ground and maybe some special mission units helping the Kurds and an advise, assist, enable. Look, they're less than 10% of the population. They would be hard-pressed even to control their own area against this million-man force that has shown a willingness to be absolutely brutal. And the same with the Azeris, again, the Baluch, the Sunni Arabs, and the others. If there is regime change, it's got to come from actually within the regime, where some leader says, enough of this, we have brought destruction on ourselves in pursuit of a nuclear weapon, arming proxies, killing thousands of Americans, Arabs, and Israelis. Stop the madness. But I'm afraid that I don't necessarily expect that to happen with this new supreme leader.
Yeah, and my big concern, of course, is that he may just mobilize the IRGC to go up and deal with the Kurds right away. Sadly, that will be an outcome we did not intend. Amos, to you, a couple of things. Israel has gone after Hezbollah again, just as there are other influential groups in the region. Israel has attacked Hezbollah very aggressively during this air campaign. What are the objectives there? And then for both of you, Dave, you talked about one half of the coin, one face of the coin, on the expenditure of ordnance to deal with missiles, rockets, and drones. But the other side of that same coin is the expenditure of precision weapons that we have been putting into the air in very large numbers, and our concern about the expenditure rates and how we'll rebuild these stockpiles. So Amos, please tell us how Israel's thinking about that, and also the really extensive attack now against Hezbollah once again.
Yeah, I want to start with the Iranian strategy, because you are not fighting a symmetrical war here.
Right.
It's not on one hand a war against insurgency or a terror organization. It's a terror state, but it's a state. And they will try to inflict pain on the Arab countries in the Gulf and on the international economy. And we already saw the blocking of the Hormuz Strait. By the way, not so much by fire. Their navy is already drowned.
Right.
40 ships and submarines and frigates are gone, but only threatening that they will fire with drones, with mines, block the 20% shipment of oil. It is not 1973, it is not 1978, but it's still making a difference. And the Iranians' strategy is to win by not losing. If the president will decide to end the war in 2 weeks, in 2 days, in 2 months, I don't know, and there will not be a regime change, they will say, we won the war by not losing.
That's right.
2 amazing, strong armies attack us and nothing happened. So we need patience, and don't think that this is a basketball game. Yes, we are already have 129 points, and they have only 2. But sometimes the 2 are making more effect if the democracies are not strong enough and resilient enough. So this is about the Iranians to set the expectations. We are winning militarily big, but after the military achievement, you need some political outcomes that I don't see them yet coming. On the drones, I'm not belong to those who are afraid of drones. Numbers. In the June war, they launched 1,054 drones. Only 2 penetrated. Only 2. And this war, not even 1. The UAE, that by the way is attacked heavily, almost in the same size of Israel. A little bit less of ballistic missiles, but more drones. And they also have a very good interception. I'm a big believer in Mark 84 and not in...
What's a Mark 84, Amos, for the crowd? What for the audience? What's a Mark 84?
Yeah, that's a one-ton bomb.
2,000 pounder, ladies and gentlemen.
These drones, with all due respect, are not deciding wars. And they may be on the... And remember, there is no ground war here. The drones in Ukraine and Russia are on the ground. In this war, and this is also important to pay attention, it is not Vietnam, it is not Iraq, it is not Afghanistan. There are not boots on the ground. There is no border, there is no front. It's who is able to transfer and to deliver more armament from one side to the other side through the sky. The rationale, John, is 1 to 200. And the 200 are hitting the target. The 1 usually kills civilians. So I think that with all due respect to the drones, what is dropped from B2, B-52, B-1, F-15, F-18, F-35 is much more yet important than the dreams about the drones, the changing the game. My view, maybe I'm conservative, but looking at wars, the drones are not a game changer.
So
I might take the other side of that just slightly, because I've spent a lot of time in Ukraine. And we're fortunate here that the Iranians are not throwing remotely the number of aerial drones at the region that you see on a daily basis in Ukraine. In fact, there are more drones on a daily basis just from the Ukrainian side. They're using 9,000 to 10,000. It's actually all unmanned systems, because as Amos correctly noted, there are unmanned ground systems. They don't even drive vehicles to and from the front anymore. It's too dangerous.
Right.
Tanks can't survive in the front lines anymore. It's a 30-kilometer on either side kill zone. But the sheer number of drones, and by the way, when we get to autonomous systems, you're going to have swarms of drones. And yes, the Emiratis are they are the gold standard on the counter-drone defense, but even there, drones have hit hospital or have hit hotels, ports, maritime bases, all the rest of this stuff. So when the numbers go up to the degree they have in Ukraine, it is a completely different situation. Noting that, yes, neither side there has the kind of air power that we have. And if you did have it, boy, that would be a game changer, although Ukraine has already got a cruise missile with a 3,000-kilometer range and a larger warhead. So it's longer and bigger than the Tomahawk cruise missile that we have. They just haven't ramped them up in production. But back to munitions, John, because this is an important point. It's not just about the interceptors, of which there are, at the end of the day, finite numbers. And that's the concern over missile math over time. But in the first day alone, the Pentagon reported that we expended $6.5 billion worth of munitions. That's by no means just interceptors. That is submarine, surface ship, and air-launched cruise missiles.
Right.
It's some of the more precision munitions that we have dropped early on. So it's all of this. And you may ask, well, we have $1 trillion defense budget. What does that matter? Well, it matters because there are limited numbers of these as well. And the most important theater in the world is the Indo-Pacific, because the most important relationship in the world is that between the U.S. and China. the most important mission for the U.S. military is to ensure that deterrence is rock solid. But as a potential adversary sees you using systems that are very much needed in that other potential fight, you have to be careful about the solidity of deterrence when it comes to the capability size, while also ensuring there's no question about your willingness to use those capabilities. And I don't believe that we have begun transitioning remotely rapidly enough from large, incredibly capable, heavily manned, exorbitantly expensive platforms to much cheaper, still very capable, unmanned systems. And again, when the autonomy sets in on this, and that's not far off, you're already having autonomy at the final stages of many Ukrainian drone missions, that is going to be a game changer in the very nature of warfare going forward. So again, the cost is not trivial because it's the opportunity cost taking from another theater. And of course, the big beneficiary of a lot of this is Russia. Russia is getting exempted now from some of the sanctions on purchase of oil because of concern about the price of Brent crude going up, and it's back up above 90 again today, I should note. And so it's going to be able to generate more revenue, higher price, more export instead of lower price and less export, as India had agreed in our tariff discussions. And also Patriots that we might have allowed Europe to purchase to give to Ukraine. The one capacity that the Ukrainians can't build yet is these very high-end interceptors. That is going to be a challenge for them as well. So there are effects elsewhere in the world from this, but right now I'd be doing, frankly, the same thing that I see us doing in our military and the Pentagon, which is you got to win the war you're in, even as you start to be concerned about the other potential ones out there.
Two quick comments. I'll come back. Amos, let me come to you in just a second on this. Dave, thank you for raising the issue that some of this expenditure rate is going to affect Ukraine because of the bank shot. We sell the high-end weapons to the Europeans give to the Ukrainians. I was just in Taiwan on security issues. They're deeply concerned about the expenditure rate and how it may affect our ability ultimately to support them.
And the Europeans have been told, you're going to wait 4 years before we start delivering Patriots interceptors to you, despite the president gathering all the CEOs of the major defense corporations together last Friday in the White House to tell them, get on with this in a very significant way.
Almost the same question to you and Hezbollah and any other thoughts.
I have to complete my answer.
Please, thank you. I apologize.
The fact that Iran is unable to launch thousands of drones is that the best missile and drone defense is attack. And Israel is attacking their bases, and from being able to shoot hundreds of ballistic missiles in the summer, they are now shooting 10, 11, 12, and the same with the drones. The fact that the drones are so effective in Russia and Ukraine, none of them has the capability to achieve air superiority and to destroy the drone bases, the drones operators, the drones factories. So once again, a war can be won by air superiority using the very expensive attack cruise missiles, Tomahawk, JSAM, in the first stage. Then you achieve air superiority from standoff, and now you go stand in with a very cheap JDAMs.
Exactly.
So
I would not assume that we're going to be able to do that against our principal potential adversary.
Please let Amos finish. Please, Amos.
If you want to fight the war, all the duration, months, 2 months, 4 months, with standoff, a very expensive weapon, you will bankrupt. No doubt about it. You need to achieve the first a couple of days to establish air superiority, and then use the airplanes and the not so sophisticated and very expensive bombs and missiles.
Right.
Anyway, I also want to emphasize that the Israeli missile defense is the best in the world.
It is.
It is Arrow, David Sling, Iron Dome, and in this war, for the first time, laser. Laser is a very cheap kind of bullet. It's less than $1. And the drones will be a very good victim to this laser weapon. So attacking and defending is always a fight, a swing that you need to have the technology on your side in defensive or in active according to what the enemy is developing. But now ask me what you want to ask.
I think you've answered all of our questions, Amos. Dave, back to you, please.
Yeah.
And we've got about 5 minutes left.
Sorry for interrupting. I thought Amos had finished. But look, I'd just be cautious about assuming because you can achieve air superiority against a country that has no air force, essentially, and has very limited air and ballistic missile defenses. Most of it was taken down by the Israeli F-35s in the first days of the 12-day air campaign, that you could do that in another theater with a much more sophisticated potential adversary who has a frontline air force and has very sophisticated air and ballistic missile defenses. So I think we have to be very careful not to over extrapolate from this particular situation where Amos is exactly right against the Iranian capabilities. This is the best way to go at it. I'd also just point out again that even the best of missile defenses, there still were about 5% of the missiles that got through in the 12-day war. And all it takes is one of those where there hasn't been a sufficient evacuation to be obviously really seriously destructive and damaging.
Amos, let me just ask a question. As you pointed out at the very beginning, Israel is the only democracy in the region. It's an old friend. We've worked together on many things. The three of us worked together on Iran years ago. We're still working on it together. But since the horrific attacks on the 7th of October, Israel has basically been mobilized to fight in Gaza, to fight Hezbollah, to fight the 12-day war, and now we're fighting again, as you said, shona bashona, shoulder to shoulder. What has been the effect, ultimately, on Israel's society of this nonstop mobilization for so long? Not just the society, but the economy as well.
I think you should go back to 1941 and ask yourself what was the effect on the American society from 1941 to 1945. We have another year and a half to go. Israel is a very resilient country. People know that they are fighting for the existence of the country. We were attacked by 7 fronts in 1948, and we survived. And we attacked again in 2003 in 7 fronts.
Yeah.
And we survived. It took, unfortunately, not 6 days, like 1967, not 18 days, like 1973. But Israel is safer than it was on the 6th of October. The main enemy, the strongest military on our border was Hezbollah. Hezbollah has more ballistic missiles than any country in Europe. And very good special forces, the Radwan force, and a lot of drones. By the way, what we have learned in the last 6 months, the drones they are launching as we speak, none of them is penetrant. But Hezbollah is gone, Hamas was defeated, even though not the total victories that the Prime Minister fantasize about. Iran is much weaker. So we have an opportunity to shape a different Middle East. And if we go from the level of drone and missile defense to the level of mega strategy, I think your president has an opportunity to shape the Middle East, to have a legacy of a different Middle East. The two of you that fought with Iranian proxies for years will see if Iran regime is gone, First, it's good vis-a-vis Russia and China. Yes, in the first months, the price of oil will go up. But who is your enemy? I called it CRINC. It's China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. This is the 4 countries that you face. It's in your national security strategy. I haven't invented it. And now Iran is gone. And who are the allies of Iran? Russia and China. Where are they? The Middle East is looking. And see
That's right.
America strong, supporting its allies. And we can shape another Middle East with no Iran. So it will be the moderate Arabs, the modern Arabs. Yes, they are not Jeffersonian democracies, but they are pro-American, they are Western, and pro-Western, and Israel, and Egypt, and Jordan. We already have peace with Egypt and Jordan. Don't forget it. And you know, John, even the Israeli-Palestinian issue will be easier to solve when Iran is not spoiling every process.
That's right.
They have spoiled the Oslo Accord. They created Hamas and Islamic Jihad that basically their terror activities push the Israeli public to the right.
And you and I tried very hard to do this together. That's right.
Yeah, if Iran is not there, it can be a Middle East that's busy with building visions of 2030, AI centers in the desert in Saudi and UAE, Israelis with Abrahamic Accord with all over the place. I think the vision to get rid of the Iranian regime and the Iranian excess is a very good vision and can be a legacy. I'm not sure it will happen, but this is where I'm looking for.
Gentlemen, we are out of time, and I've got hours of questions remaining. My sincere apologies to the audience. And this room it's 8:30 in the morning. This room is full, so it's really terrific. Generals, I have one quick question. I'm going to get the hook here if I'm not careful. One quick question, please, for a quick answer. Montgomery Summit 2027. If we convene again, what will we be talking about?
The new Iranian regime, inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah. Amos.
Yeah, I hope that we will discuss the normalization between Israel and the rest of the Arab and the Islamic world, Indonesia, other countries, and we will watch what the Chinese have learned from the fact that the US has the best military in the world, and whether it changed their attitude towards Taiwan.
Generals, it was wonderful to be with you again. I wish it had been in person. I look forward to seeing you here next year together. Ladies and gentlemen, join me.